Because once they snap, once they decide enough is enough, the whole room feels it. And that's exactly what's happening with Kimmi Scott right now. For years, people watched her on Love and Marriage Huntsville and believed she was the peacemaker, the calm one, the grown woman in a house full of chaos. She was supposed to be the patient type, the one who took a deep breath before speaking, the one who refused to get pulled into petty feuds or messy back and forths. She wasn't the one subtweeting, she wasn't the one throwing shade. She was the one trying to keep the peace when everyone else seemed addicted to conflict. But what nobody expected was for her to reach a breaking point. And when she did, it wasn't a cute little clapback. It wasn't a slick Instagram story. It wasn't even a heated moment on camera. This time, Kimmi responded the way only someone who is truly done responds, with lawyers, with documentation, and with a tone that said, "I've tried being respectful. I've tried being silent, but now you've gone too far." And the person she fired back at? Nell Fletcher, a woman she once tolerated. A woman she once tried to keep cordial. A woman she once believed she could coexist with, even if they weren't best friends. But that illusion is gone. Whatever line existed between them, Nell crossed it. And once she did, Kimmi made it clear, this was no longer petty drama. This wasn't a storyline. This wasn't some spicy argument for ratings. This got real. And it got real fast. People forget Kimmi didn't come into the reality TV world with messy energy. Before cameras were rolling, before social media turned every moment into content, she lived a steady life, a quiet life, a life built on responsibility, career, and family. Nursing was her heart, real estate was her hustle, and marriage, that was her safe space. She built her name long before Huntsville knew her face. And because she was always grounded, people assumed she didn't feel things as deeply. They assumed she could take comments, whispers, little digs, rumors, and just walk away. They thought nothing truly got under her skin. But here's the thing. Even the strongest person can only take so much. Even the calmest woman can only swallow so many insults. What people didn't realize was how much pressure had been building behind the scenes. Not from the cameras, not from the internet, but from years of subtle tension with Nell Fletcher, tension most fans saw hints of, but never fully understood. There were moments over the seasons where the air felt different when they were in the same room. Conversations that seemed polite but carried a sharp edge underneath. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes. And comments that sounded just a little too pointed to be accidental. It wasn't blatant enemies energy. It was slow burn, quiet resentment. Two women with completely different personalities trying to exist in the same orbit. One calm and controlled, one outspoken and bold. And sometimes that combination can hold, until one day it doesn't. And that day arrived at a simple event. An event where nobody expected fireworks. A setting where no cameras were rolling, no producers were manipulating conversations, no microphones were waiting to catch sound bites. It should have been a peaceful night. But when Kimmi and Nell ended up in the same room, two women with unresolved history, built-up tension, and months of unspoken issues, every crack beneath the surface finally broke open. The problem didn't start with a screen. Not even with a harsh word. It started with a comment. A subtle comment. One of those remarks wrapped in a smile, gentle enough to seem harmless, unless you knew the real meaning behind it. Nell said something about business deals and certain people not being as transparent as they pretend. She didn't say Kimmi's name, but she didn't have to. Everyone in that circle heard the edge in her voice. Everyone felt the shift in energy. Everyone saw Kimmi pause, tilt her head slightly, and realize, okay, so we're doing this now. For a moment, Kimmi tried to keep it professional. She gave one of those calm responses that said more in silence than words ever could. But Nell pushed again, and this time she didn't tiptoe around it. She brought up the failed real estate opportunity. She brought up the phone calls. She brought up the deal that went wrong and left both sides pointing fingers. And here's where things spiraled. To Kimmi, that business matter was private, something she never planned to discuss publicly, something she thought they both had agreed to move on from. She was willing to let the past stay in the past. But Nell? She wasn't letting it stay buried. Not that night. Witnesses say she accused Kimmi of being fake, someone who played innocent in the daylight but moved differently behind closed doors. She claimed Kimmi's reputation didn't match her actions. She said Kimmi was quiet until it benefits her. And that's when Kimmi changed. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. But the calm tone was gone. The peacekeeper persona stepped aside. And the woman who had been disrespected one too many times finally stepped forward. People say Kimmi stood straight, looked Nell dead in the eyes, and told her she was tired of being painted as something she wasn't. But Nell wasn't backing down. In fact, she escalated. She made a comment about Kimmi's marriage, something deeply personal, something with absolutely no place in a public setting, something meant to hurt. And it worked. The room shifted instantly. The vibe got heavy. People stopped talking, stopped sipping, stopped smiling. Because when you start talking about someone's marriage, especially someone like Kimmi who guards her personal life with everything she has, you're not just being shady anymore. You're crossing boundaries that you can't uncross. From there, it became an avalanche. Years of tension exploded. Old resentment resurfaced. Voices rose. And two women who kept their distance for months suddenly found themselves centimeters apart, firing emotional shots in front of business owners, sponsors, and people who were absolutely not supposed to witness this moment. Someone recorded it. A few people, actually. Not clear audio, not perfect camera angles, but enough. Enough for lawyers to get involved. Enough for reputations to be questioned. Enough for this private argument to turn into a very public problem. And this is where things took a sharp turn. See, Kimmi doesn't play about her name. She doesn't play about her credibility. And she definitely doesn't play about allegations that could impact her career. So instead of getting online and throwing subliminals, she did something Nell never expected. She made a call. A very specific call. To her attorney. Because once this argument left that room and entered group chats, fan pages, and inboxes, the narrative was no longer in her control. And Kimmi wasn't about to let someone rewrite her story or damage her professional reputation over a heated moment. What she did next shocked everyone. She had her legal team draft a formal, documented response addressing the accusations Nell had made, both in private and in front of witnesses. Not a threatening letter, not a warning. A demand. A demand for Nell to retract certain statements. A demand for clarification of certain accusations. A demand to correct any public narrative implying Kimmi engaged in unethical behavior. This wasn't petty. This wasn't dramatic. This was strategic. Because Kimmi knew that once rumors start spreading, they grow. And once they grow, they become truth in the eyes of the internet, even if the real truth is nowhere in sight. So she shut it down at the root. People close to the situation say Nell was caught off guard. She expected drama. She expected a shouting match, maybe a messy post or two, but she did not expect legal paperwork. She didn't expect consequences. And suddenly, things got quiet. Very quiet. Both women stopped posting. They avoided public events. No cryptic messages. No shade. Just silence. Which, ironically, only made the fans talk more. Team Kimmi said she was protecting her dignity. Team Nell said she was backpedaling. People began analyzing who unfollowed who liked what, who deleted which picture. Every action became a clue. Every silence felt suspicious. Every move added fuel to a fire that had already burned out of control. But behind the scenes, it was deeper than that. A third person, someone mentioned during the argument, decided to hire their own lawyer. Their business was referenced in passing during the blow-up, and they weren't about to risk their livelihood over someone else's feud. And that's when everyone realized this wasn't drama anymore. This was a legal web with multiple sides, multiple risks, and multiple people trying to protect themselves. What started as a verbal clash had turned into a situation where reputations, partnerships, and business relationships were on the line. And Kimmi? She was done staying quiet. What's hitting people the hardest right now is the emotional impact of all this, because Kimmi has always carried herself like someone who didn't want to be dragged into mess, someone who tries to avoid conflict, someone who stays graceful even when people push her buttons. But everyone has limits. Being misunderstood hurts. Being misrepresented hurts. Having your character questioned hurts. And for Kimmi, this wasn't just an argument for entertainment. This was personal. She spent years building her credibility, professionally, personally, and on television. She earned respect the hard way. She survived things most people never knew about. She fought through private battles without asking for sympathy. So when someone suggested she wasn't who she said she was, when someone hinted she was sneaky or dishonest, when someone brought her marriage into the conversation, it hit deeper than anyone in that room could imagine. Those closest to her say she went home that night and cried, not because she was weak, but because she was exhausted. Exhausted from constantly having to defend her character. Exhausted from being pushed into storylines she didn't ask for. Exhausted from trying to remain calm while people tested her patience. This situation didn't just impact her public image. It impacted her spirit, her trust, her peace. And maybe that's why she finally fought back, not with anger, but with boundaries, with consequences, with legal clarity. Because sometimes protecting your peace means standing up, even when people expect you to sit down. Now everyone is waiting to see what comes next. Will the recordings leak? Will the show address it? Will Kimmi and Nell ever sit down face to face again? There are whispers that producers want to rebuild the argument on camera. They want the cast to react. They want the moment to become part of the storyline. But both women know the reality. Some things can't be reconstructed. Some words can't be unsaid. Some damage can't be undone. As of now, they're both silent. Not because they're calm, but because they're calculating. This fight didn't end the night it happened. This fight is still unfolding in shadows, in private conversations, in legal offices. And the truth is, the fallout could shape the rest of the season. It could redefine both their reputations. It could change who they stand next to, who they trust, who they film with. Because sometimes, the moment that shifts everything isn't caught on camera. It's the moment nobody was supposed to see. The moment that reveals who people really are when the spotlight is off. And whether people like it or not, Kimmi Scott has made one thing crystal clear. She is done being silent. She is done being walked over. She is done letting people rewrite her story. This time, she's speaking. This time, she's standing her ground. This time, she's firing back. And if the first shot was with lawyers, just imagine what comes next.